out our address where our planet is?
I've often thought about that, about the fact that the I Love Lucy reruns are somewhere out there, and someone is listening in and making a judgment call on who the heck we are by some of the old television and radio broadcasts that they're hearing. That is a strange idea, let alone the fact that they might be hostile. But they might be very curious and have a really bad impression about us.
Well, especially some of those TV shows were really bad. We went through that series, of Cowboys, and then from Cowboys we went into, for a while we went into like war shows like Combat and all that type of shows for a few years, the Desert Fox, all that stuff. Then they went into just one weird cycle after another. And depending on where they're at and how long it takes that signal to reach where they're at, let alone listening to, like, when I was on radio, I was really funky. I think they would really get a bad impression of me and you.
Yeah, I think they would definitely get the wrong impression, and I think we would have a lot of explaining to do if we ever met them.
And I sure would hate them to get that episode of The Twilight Zone called To Serve Man. That would be bad.
Oh, yeah, that would be bad. It's a cookbook.
Yeah, that's why, I hate to say it. Besides Peter Davenport, you have the lady in Cashiers, North Carolina, skycashiers.com. She, takes reportings of UFOs. Like I mentioned to you, Michael, that she was a seasoned reporter for large newspapers and stuff like that. She insists that some of the information that people have come up and given to her, that we're supposedly working with a couple alien races, and one of them, she said, are cannibals. So I don't know. But the point is, I just don't feel comfortable with the government, doing, they're doing it in the name of science, and a lot of the stuff they do in science comes back and bites us right on the butt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, another angle on that same idea of whether we should be giving out our address literally to aliens is, so even if we do decide that it's okay to be sending signals out into space, who gets to decide what message we're sending? Because I'd like to be able to contribute to that. I'd like to know that it's not just one person writing this greeting from their point of view. I'd like to know that there's kind of a universal human message that we might be able to send, and that everybody would have a part in deciding what that message is going to be. Because right now we don't have that. There's like a few scientists, shuttered up in their laboratories on their own, kind of coming up with what these messages are going to be. And I don't know if that's the right way to do it.
I don't think so. And, Michael, being an attorney out there, shouldn't they have some type of disclaimer on the messages they send out? Like, basically, well, if you're hostile or cannibal, just please disregard this, signal that you just received.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me, the old-fashioned time capsules that they used to, bury and for future generations to dig up. And I often thought it was just great where they had individuals, children, housewives, businessmen, different kinds of people putting messages into those time capsules. And then when you dig them up 100 years later, you get the different point of view of the people that lived back then. And that's what I think Mark is getting at here. If we had some kind of a message that was getting out there that would have a well-rounded view of what humanity is, who we are, that would tell them a lot more than maybe a few scientists trying to figure out, what kind of code to send them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope we'll get a chance. I hope we'll get a chance to be part of that process.
Or we live long enough.
Yeah.
Mark, before we get off the air here, I wanted to make sure that the people out there realized that Dr. Hyneks started the Close Encounters idea and first, second, and third kind, but there are close encounters of the fourth kind. basically the idea of abduction of people. There also is the close encounters of the fifth kind. The fact that there are stories of human-initiated contact with aliens. One of my clients is Dr. Richard Haynes, and he was the gentleman who wrote the book CE5. He was the NASA scientist retired who was in charge of the Human Factors Division of NASA in the Apollo and Mercury days. And he kind of made that, or coined that term, the idea that there are cases out there where human beings have initiated contact with either a laser, a flashlight, or even, remember Reverend Gill waving at the flying saucer that was hovering over his monastery, and they waved back? That kind of thing is close encounters of the fifth kind.
That's really an interesting angle on things. I'm glad you brought that up, because it kind of got its start after Dr. Hynek passed away in 1986. I've been really struck by this weird coincidence. So Dr. Hynek passes away in 1986, and in the very following year, 1987, two books are published: Whitley Strieber's Communion and what's the other one? Intruders. I think that's John Mack's book.
Bud Hopkins.
Bud Hopkins, yes, thank you. Bud Hopkins' book, Intruders. I believe that also came out in 1987. So 1 year after Dr. Hynek passes away, you got these two really influential, really popular, best-selling books about this whole new kind of alien encounter that nobody's ever had before. All of a sudden, you've got these alien abductions where the aliens, people aren't just like encountering a UFO out on a lonely country highway, or out fishing on a pier. All of a sudden, the aliens are coming into people's bedrooms and snatching them from their beds. It's like a whole different abduction paradigm just suddenly appears in 1987, and the whole narrative changes. All of a sudden, the whole alien abduction experience becomes a very, very different thing. It's more of an invasion now, where the witnesses wake up in the middle of the night and they see this creature standing at the foot of their bed, and they feel paralyzed. They can't move. They can't talk. And in a lot of cases, then the being, or multiple beings, will somehow get them out of their bedroom, and somehow they're in another environment, which I guess we just assume is a UFO, although there isn't ever an actual, there isn't always an actual UFO sighting accompanying this phenomenon. Very often, the very first indication that something's going on is, these beings' presence in people's bedrooms. So, for me, just kind of looking at the UFO phenomenon from like the 30,000 feet high vantage point, trying to understand what it all means, things like that really, really grab me and really fascinate me. Why did the whole abduction experience suddenly change overnight in 1987? I think it's, and I point out that that's just one short year after Dr. Hynek passed away. I don't think there's any connection there, but it sure is a weird coincidence.
Maybe people too were actually starting to come out and telling their actual experiences. That's my feeling, but I don't know. I've had some people on the show that one was number 9 implant removed from Roger Lear. And he had a good story. In fact, he's coming back on in about 10 days. Talk a little bit more about it. It just makes you wonder, from people, being in bed. I had a guest on, I don't know if you heard it, Michael, that one night where the guy, saw 5 grays coming towards his bedroom, and they kind of instructed him to put his head on the pillow and go to sleep, and he was abducted. But then it was a little strange after that. It seems like Abbott, a woodsman. So he would go out in the woods, and all of a sudden, which he never had happened before, owls would kind of follow him. And it got kind of really, interesting. Every time he went out in the woods, there'd be not one or two, it'd be a bunch of them, all through his encounter being out in the woods. And I asked him, I said, do you maybe think that was implanted in your head when you were abducted? Maybe you were thinking of an owl or something, and they use that to, kind of camouflage. When you were seeing these owls, you maybe were being abducted again.
Oh, yeah, the owl motif, and people seeing owls looking in through their bedroom windows. That's a part of this whole scenario that I find really, really kind of haunting. I think the owls are kind of scary to begin with, but to think that they might be some sort of representation of an alien presence really makes my skin crawl.
Well, I haven't seen one, so I'm happy.
Mark is also correct when he says that in 1987 or so, where when Whitley Strieber's book came out, and the picture of an alien was on the front cover of that book. Talk about owls and talk about scary images. That was basically the first time in the iconic genre that that figure, that face, was kind of like out in the public. After that, I understand that Whitley Strieber was inundated by millions of letters that came into him saying that they have seen that face somewhere before. Matter of fact, he has an entire book written on just the letters that he got from that book.
That doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all that book would have unleashed that kind of avalanche of people writing him letters, because going back to what I was saying before about what motivates someone to report a UFO, a lot of times they just want to know, has anybody else ever seen the same thing? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there, the same phenomenon. A lot of people, I bet, read that book and just thought, oh my gosh, this guy knows what I've been going through. I need to contact him. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me a bit that he got inundated with letters.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I think these experiences, whether they're just the kind of old school UFO experience or this more modern type of abduction experience, these are really profound experiences that are very real to the person who's involved in them. The image of that alien from the cover of Communion. Just think about what that image, that face, is like universally recognized. I mean, I have an emoji on my phone with that alien face on it.
Wow.
It's crazy. That image, that face is like stamped into all of our consciousness now.
Well, you know what I was trying to get at, too? A lot of the people have been abducted, like Timothy, he was number 9 removal implant. About a year later, after he had Roger, remove that implant, him and his wife were going into town, and about the same mountain, the side of a mountain where he had his first encounter with a UFO and was abducted, he saw another UFO. And they stopped and looked at it, and his wife goes, no, let's go to town. And he left. But then again, too, he could have been abducted and not realize it, just like the first time.
Yeah. I have a friend who lives not far from here who he has had a lifetime. He's one of that select few people who has had a lifetime of abduction experiences going back to, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I'm pretty sure he told me that it started around age 10, just sort of lying out in his backyard, and all of a sudden there was a presence somewhere that he felt, and, that was the first of many times he was abducted and examined. So, yeah, those are such amazing stories and such profound experiences for the people who go through them. And when you actually know someone who can tell you firsthand about the experience, it's pretty profound. That's the only word I can think of.
Well, I'm kind of concerned about you, Michael. You're going out trying to,